a very good evening to everyone. And as we all know that this is the series of webinar published by Neuroequilibrium Society of India. And this is the second webinar in this series. And the first was done by Dr. Srinivas Troswala, where we uh, have seen that how the physiology of the vestibular system works, what is the core concept of the physiology of the vestibular system along with some anatomy. Now, today the webinar will cover the history, taking part of the vertigo. Vertigo, as you know, in vertigo, the most important point is to start is the history taking. If the history taking is right, then we go always in the right direction. It can pinpoint to a pathology, or it can give you at least a very good differential diagnosis. So for this session today, we have our speaker, Dr. Avinash Bijlani, and I will be moderating today the session, Dr. Amit Kesri, and then we have the panelists, Dr. Kranti Bhavna, Dr. Srinivas Troswala, and Dr. Sandeep Sharma. So all of them, the panelists and the speaker are very expert in the field of vertigo. Just two words of introduction about Dr. Avinash Bijlani. Our speaker today is a senior ENT surgeon and neurologist. Is a visiting consultant with DHLI and Super Specialty Hospital, Delhi. He runs the Madhav ENT and Vertigo Center, which is equipped with a state-of-the-art VNG system and all other vertigo equipments. He is the governing body member of Delhi AOI and he has been actively involved in the IMA Delhi. He has very keen interest in management of vertigo disorders and has presented in various forums like AOICon, ISOCon, and Neurological and NES Society. Dr. Avinash Bijlani has also developed a low-cost 3D model of the semicircular canal for better explanation of the PPVP. So we will, without any wastage of time, we will now listen to our speaker today, Dr. Avinash Bijlani. So over to you, Dr. Avinash Bijlani, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amit Kesri, for your kind words. At the outset, I would like to thank you, Dr. Narendra Suratwala, the president of NES, and all the governing body members of NES, including Dr. Pawan Singhal, for having been so nice towards me and inviting me to talk in this august body. So thank you very much. I feel rather humbled and also elated by this kind gesture of NES. Thank you. And I'll start sharing my screen now. So, right. So I'll first start talking about how to take a good clinical history whenever we are faced with a balance disordered patient. What is our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal in each and every patient, irrespective of whether he's a vertigo patient or anything else, is to arrive at a reasonable diagnosis. So at the outset, I would like to say that there is no spot diagnosis in a patient of vertigo. You see three pictures over here pertaining to the ear, perforation in the ear, a case of acute tonsillitis and nasal polyposis. So one look and, within minutes, you can be done with the diagnosis in the OPD, not minutes, but a few seconds. But that is not the case with vertigo. So to reach the goal of, making a good diagnosis in vertigo, what we need is history, and history. A careful patient interview focused on type of vertigo, the duration of the vertiginous event, the frequency, and the triggers, along with a good clinical examination with a specific eye on the type of nystagmus that we are getting. The eyes are basically the show window to the vestibular system. So we'll slowly go through the clinical history taking. The patient comes with very vague symptoms. The patient is not a doctor, and he's already confused and all because of the problems that he's facing. So he may present with any of the following, like saying that he is feeling dizzy, spinning, or a sensation of lightheadedness, heavy-headedness, wobbly, woozy, whatever, etc., etc. So now it's up to the doctor as to what to do. First and foremost, be prepared to give time to this patient. Let him talk. Don't be in a hurry. Keep some time spared for the patient of vertigo. So the aims of clinical history, again, at the cost of a bit of repetition, are to reach a diagnosis. In fact, in more than 90% cases, if you cannot reach a diagnosis in a patient of vertigo by clinical history, it may not be possible to make it with the most exhaustive investigations available. And the second is to clearly delineate the type and extent of disability caused by the disorder. The same disorder can cause different extents of disability in different patients, so you have to gauge it. For example, a patient with acute peripheral vestibulopathy, one patient might come in literally vomiting a lot and pretty nauseous, and the other one may not be so bad, although the diagnosis remains the same. So you have to literally gauge as to how much care this particular patient is going to need, and also to determine the contribution of medication and motor learning in adaptation or maladaptation. Some people adapt very well to the disorder. Another patient, for example, a patient of BPPV, he may just keep his neck very stiff almost all the time, refuse to sleep on the side that he was having the trouble even after he has come out of the BPPV. So when we say vertigo or dizziness, we are not talking about specific disease entities, but this is the presenting symptom in the large number of disorders which come from varying etiology and pathogenesis. And vertigo, when we say, is a subset of dizziness. And dizziness by itself is a very non-specific complaint. Vertigo is a specific form related to the distortion of the vestibular contribution, which may be caused by peripheral vestibular organ deficit, a central transmission deficit, or an improper cortical integration. One may say, why history? I have all the latest equipment with me. No. The patient's complaint, I say, as I already said, is vague. And it becomes very crucial in the emergency room, particularly. In the emergency room, you cannot think in terms of investigations. You have to immediately differentiate between vertigo due to a peripheral disorder from the more sinister acute stroke syndromes. Again, when you get patients with recurrent vertigo or dizziness, usually they present to us in the symptom-free interval. You may not find anything even on clinical examination or from your investigations. The diagnosis will totally depend upon a good clinical history, and you have to talk about the duration of attacks, their frequency, etc. So brief classification of dizziness, which was presented by Drachman. Vertigo is an illusionary sensation of movement in space. It may result from vestibular or a central cause. More commonly, it arises from a vestibular cause. Disequilibrium, that is a sensation of imbalance or unsteadiness. Again, it may have various causes like a vestibular or a somatosensory deficit or a visual problem or from central deficit. Presyncope, this is a sense of impending loss of consciousness, and the causes an impaired cerebral blood flow, or it could be a hypoglycemia. Lightheadedness, this is a most vague kind of a sensation when the patient says he's getting a sensation of floating, swimming, or rocking with giddiness, and usually this kind of a situation is worsened by stress. So to enumerate the salient features in the history, I'll go through each one of them one by one. So you have to elicit first the type of dizziness the patient is suffering from, the duration of the dizziness, whether it is persistent or recurrent, what is the degree of disability, whether the patient has had falls, whether the problem is improving with time, or it is deteriorating, or it is stabilized. You have to ask for a proper drug history, what medications the patient has taken earlier and what he is taking as of now. You have to think in terms of the trigger factors. You have to ask for associated symptoms, and also ask a history of other diseases that the patient may be suffering from. So first we will begin with the type of dizziness. If he complains of a rotatory vertigo, as if in a merry-go-round ride, this more so suggests a labyrinthine cause. For example, acute vestibular neuritis. A postural imbalance, as in a boat trip. This is more suggestive of a bilateral vestibulopathy. Lightheadedness, that is a non-specific symptom. So he may be a patient of phobic postural vertigo. So first we will take up dizziness and lightheadedness. Many of us have felt pre-syncopal dizziness at some time when we have been standing up rapidly from a relaxed lying down position. This is the best example of this category. Another cause is orthostatic hypotension. Then you have cases of cardiac arrhythmia. These are non-vestibular causes mainly. Hyperventilation syndrome, panic attacks, hypoglycemia, or drug intoxication. Now, episodic attacks of recurrent vertigo. Here your diagnosis comes to the following. The differential diagnosis is vestibular migraine or Meniere's disease. In Meniere's disease, if you're suspecting Meniere's disease, please always ask about drop attacks. Then you have vertebrobasilar transit ischemic attacks, vestibular paroxysmia, parallel fistulas, BPPV, and Cogan syndrome that fall into this category. Then you have patients who have sustained persistent rotatory vertigo. Now here you might be dealing with an acute peripheral loss of vestibular function or a pontomedullary brainstem lesion in the region of the vestibular nuclei. Now, how to differentiate? How to get a differential diagnosis of sustained rotatory vertigo? The common peripheral causes are vestibular neuritis, a labyrinthitis, autoimmune ear disease, acoustic neuroma, a labyrinthine infarction, or a labyrinthine concussion. Central causes include multiple sclerosis, tumors, or brainstem infarctions. Now, coming to positional or positioning vertigo. I will differentiate between positioning and positional vertigo when I come to the physical examination part. So most common cause by and large is BPPV. Vestibular paroxysmia, although is a very rare cause, but should come to mind. Then you have psychogenic positioning vertigo, and then you have the central causes of positional vertigo, where the deficit may lie in the vestibular nuclei, dorsal vermis, or the vestibular cerebellar pathways. In this category, you have positional downbeat nystagmus, central positional nystagmus, central paroxysmal positional vertigo, and central positioning vomiting. Now, one must try to find out if the patient is suffering from oscillopsia, which results from a defect in the vestibulo-ocular reflex, or less commonly is due to extraocular muscle paresis. The patient complains of an apparent motion of the visual scene, and he has inability to read or recognize faces while walking. And this worsens in the dark and when the patient is walking on uneven ground. And the most frequent cause of oscillopsia is a bilateral vestibulopathy. This is how the patient will present. As if he is walking with the camera in his hand and he sees the objects moving. Here I would like to share with you a story about one Dr. Crawford, who was a British physician, and he took streptomycin, which is a vestibulotoxic drug, for treating his tuberculosis, and that resulted in a bilateral vestibulopathy. To begin with, this poor guy, he would have to, in order to read a book, he would have to stabilize his head with both the hands and the elbows resting on a table. Well, he slowly improved with time, but whenever he would be walking on the road, and the faces of people who would go across would be hazy for him. So he was inclined to say hello to every passerby, irrespective of whether he was known to him or not, because he never knew whether the person who was passing by was known to him or not. So that is how bad oscillopsia can be for a patient. So now coming to the duration of vertigo. I'll skip this slide, straight away go to the next slide, which depicts much better. If the audience likes, they can take a snapshot of this also, because if you have a case of recurrent vertigo and the duration of each episode is between seconds to minutes, the two most common diagnoses that come to mind are benign paroxysmal positional vertigo and vestibular paroxysmia. And if the duration of the episodes is between minutes to hours, you think in terms of vestibular migraine and Meniere's disease. And if the problem has been persistent for days together, the most common thing that you think is that of vestibular neuritis or an acute unilateral vestibulopathy. And on the other hand, if the problem has been persistent for months to years, the most common cause is a persistent postural perceptual dizziness, that is a psychogenic disorder. The other things are bilateral vestibulopathy or a central vestibular vertigo. Now, the most difficult for any physician is a persistent recurrent chronic vertigo. persistent or recurrent chronic vertigo. Because this patient, he is probably not coming to you for the first time. He walks in with a lot of investigation reports and prescriptions, some relevant, some irrelevant, and you have to go through that phase. Well, in chronic persistent dizziness, the symptoms are primarily related to body posture. And the problem becomes more severe when the patient is walking or standing, and he feels better while sitting, and the problem is almost gone when the patient goes to lie down. And the common differential diagnosis in this category are a psychiatric dizziness, again a bilateral vestibulopathy, a physiological aging. Nowadays we are talking in terms of breast bivestibulopathy also, so that is resulting from physiological aging. Then there are numerous neurological diseases, and it could be even drug induced. And recurrent vertigo, which has been there for a long time, the most common cause is vestibular migraine, as we all know by now. And then you have Meniere's disease or TIAs and vestibular paroxysmias, perilymph fistula, and BPPV in this category. We must ask about the degree of disability. Excuse me. We must ask about the degree of disability and a history of falls. Patients with peripheral vertigo are usually able to stand and walk without much support, while those with central vertigo, these are the ones who need support to stand or even walk. Ipsiversive falls occur with vestibular neuritis or Wallenberg syndrome, and also in BPPV. Controversive falls are seen with autolytic Tullio phenomena or in a case of vestibular epilepsy.
Sir, can you go a bit slowly?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
And just a bit slowly, because we have covered a lot of things in a small span of time. So
okay, I'm so sorry. You could have told me earlier. You could have told me earlier.
So maybe that we can go back to where the time schedule was there. Just one slide back. Yeah, this one. Yes.
This one. Okay,
so,
sure.
You can just explain this a bit.
Yeah, sure. I will do that, Amit. And thank you for telling me that I was going too fast. Sorry. Well, a differential diagnosis can be made even on the basis of the duration of the symptoms. Now, when you come to recurrent attacks of vertigo, episodic vertigo, and if the patient complains of the episodes occurring for just a few seconds or at the most a few minutes, the first thing that comes to mind is a benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. And less common diagnosis that comes to mind is vestibular paroxysmia. And if the patient has been complaining of recurrent episodes that last from minutes to a few hours, the first and foremost diagnosis that comes to mind is a vestibular migraine. And the other one, that is Meniere's disease. Now, if there's a presentation of acute attack of vertigo that is persistently there for the last few days, then we think in terms of a vestibular neuritis more commonly, and sometimes we could be even dealing with a case of a cerebellar stroke syndrome. When you come to persistent vertigo, which has been there for months to years, then one can think of a psychogenic vertigo and what we call as triple PD, that is persistent postural perceptual dizziness. And bilateral vestibulopathy, of course, here the patient will not present with sensation of vertigo, but he will present more in terms of instability. And of course, central vestibular vertigo, which has not been ever compensated, can also present like this. Dr. Amit, is the speed all right now?
Yeah, it's all right. So there is a lot of question about how to differentiate between BPVP and vestibular paroxysmia, just for us.
Yeah. Well, BPPV, in fact, by the history, the patient will always get it in a particular position on lying down or getting out of bed, either to the right or to the left. In case of posterior canal BPPV, of course, if it's a horizontal canal BPPV, it will happen whether the patient turns to the left or to the right. And another thing is that BPPV will not ever happen with the patient in the erect position unless the patient bends down. Whereas vestibular paroxysmia can happen at any time, and vestibular paroxysmia by definition is such that there will be several attacks, and these are usually very, very short lasting, occurring for a few seconds. By definition, vestibular paroxysmia occurs by change in head position, and it is not related to any changes in gravity. Whereas BPPV, as we all know from the pathophysiology of BPPV, that happens due to the effect of gravity. And vestibular paroxysmia can happen in the erect position, it can happen in any position. And usually the attacks of vestibular paroxysmia are much short lasting, and they occur several times in a day. I think that answers the question.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah,
Sir.
yeah. So I'll go to the next slide now. So now we'll come to attacks of recurrent vertigo, having been there for a very long time, and also persistent dizziness that is there all the time, having been there for a long time. So chronic persistent dizziness is usually not described as vertigo or a sense of rotation, but the primary symptoms in this are related to the body posture of the patient. And it becomes more severe when the patient is walking or standing, and it becomes better on sitting down, and is almost absent in the recumbent position. And the differential diagnosis, the first and foremost, is a psychiatric dizziness, then followed by bilateral vestibulopathy. Physiological aging is another cause. We've been talking rather recently in terms of presbyvestibulopathy, and that is what presbyvestibulopathy is, the effect of physiological aging on the vestibular organs. Then there are a large number of neurological diseases, and also if the patient has been persistently on some drugs, even that can result with a chronic persistent dizziness. Now coming to recurrent attacks of vertigo having been present for a long time, and the first and foremost thing that comes to mind is a vestibular migraine, followed by Meniere's disease, then vertebrobasilar transient ischemic attacks, vestibular paroxysmia, perilimb fistulas, and BPPV. Now one must find out about the degree of disability that the patient is suffering from, whether he has a history of falls or not. Patients who suffer from peripheral vestibular disorder, usually they're able to stand on their own and they can walk without much support. While those coming with a central vertigo, these are the ones which by and large always need some support to be able to stand or walk. So that can also help us differentiate between a central vertigo or a peripheral vertigo, whether the patient is able to stand or walk on his own without support, or the patient needs support to stand up. Now coming to falls, ipsiversive falls are seen in cases of vestibular neuritis, Wallenberg syndrome, and BPPV. Contraversive falls are seen in otolithic Tullio phenomena that happens with patients of Meniere's, and also in cases of vestibular epilepsy. We must ask the patient whether it is difficult for him to walk in the darkness. And if he says yes, then we are inclined to think in terms of a bilateral vestibular disorder, bilateral vestibulopathy. Is the patient afraid to look left or right in a jiffy to cross the road? Does the dizziness increase in crowded places? Does the patient have fear of heights? These couple of things give us an idea that we are dealing with the psychogenic dizziness. Now coming to progression of the problem. Peripheral disorders, by and large, they tend to improve over time because the compensatory mechanism starts working within 3 days of the acute attack. Although it may take weeks to months, but then the patient usually improves over time. but at least doesn't show worsening, even if there is a maladaptation and the compensatory mechanisms have not been aided properly by the rehabilitation exercises, but still the patient will never worsen. Central lesions are mostly permanent, and if the disease is progressing, then the patient may deteriorate over time. Then it's very important that we ask for the social and medication history. And the common drugs that we must ask about are aminoglycosides, loop diuretics, if the patient has been on antidepressants, if the patient has been on antipsychotics, any other sedatives, muscle relaxants, if he has been taking any antihistamines, and alcohol, of course, and then specifically labyrinthine sedatives or any other anti-vertigo drugs. As we all know, aminoglycosides and loop diuretics, they are vestibulotoxic, and the rest of them, they all cause a bit of sedation and a bit of dizziness. In the previous talk by Dr. Srinivas Dorasala, somebody had asked about the effect of alcohol on the vestibular system, so I decided to include it in today's talk. So, well, if somebody has been a bit too tipsy and has consumed a lot of alcohol on a given day, that can definitely give rise to a feeling of rotation. Why? Because alcohol is lighter than the endolymph, and the cupula, it's a highly vascular area as compared to the rest of the semicircular canal. So once the alcohol is in the blood, it gets relatively much faster into the cupula, and the cupula being having received much more of it, so the cupula becomes buoyant, and this buoyancy of the cupula leads to the dizziness and also nystagmus when the patient tries to lie on one side. So there's a deflection of the left and right horizontal cupulae, which adds up and induces a strong feeling of rotation. Now coming to trigger factors. Is the vertigo present at rest? Your diagnosis could be any of these. If the patient's visit is the first visit, or rather the attack is the first ever attack, you will also include vestibular migraine, Meniere's disease, or a downbeat nystagmus syndrome, along with the more common diagnosis that you would think of, that is an acute vestibular neuritis. Is it triggered by walking? Leads you to think in terms of a bilateral vestibulopathy. Does it happen by turning the head to the side? Again, bilateral vestibulopathy comes to mind, and I recently said vestibular paroxysmia. One of the trigger factors is head motion. Now, changing the head position relative to gravity leads you to think in terms of a BPPV. Is it triggered by coughing, pressing the triggers of the ear, or induced by loud sounds? You think in terms of a third window. Now, context-dependent intensity. Does it worsen in certain social or environmental situations? Does the patient have fear of heights? Is the patient scared to go to a supermarket? Does he feel much better at home as compared to going out? Is he shy to go out of home? Then you think in terms of a phobic postural vertigo. Now you should also ask for associated symptoms, as they are called also neighborhood symptoms. Should ask questions pertaining to the neighborhood symptoms related to the peripheral vestibular system, and also central neurological symptoms. The vestibular nuclei, the reticular formation, and the midline vestibulocerebellar structures, these are the ones which mainly integrate vestibular and also autonomic activities. So we should ask if the patient has a change in salivation. Does he have increased gastric motility, vomiting? Are there any endocrine responses? Does he feel cold? Is he sweating? Does he feel pale? So these go in favor of a vestibular deficit. Auditory dysfunction. Does he have a hearing loss? How long has it been there? Which is the side effect? Is it unilateral or a bilateral hearing loss? Has it been gradual in onset, or is it of a sudden onset? Does it fluctuate? For example, fluctuation will give you an idea as to Meniere's disease. Does he also have tinnitus? Does he have a feeling of pressure in the ear? Is there a past history of ear discharge? Does he have a history of trauma? Has there been any ear surgery? So peripheral vestibular disorders where you find auditory dysfunction, they are Meniere's disease, a parallel fistula, CP angle and temporal bone tumors, vestibular paroxysmias, and ear trauma. Central disorders, rarely so, but yes, vestibular epilepsy and multiple sclerosis in the caudal brainstem will present with auditory dysfunction. Now, migraine-related vertigo. Now we're talking in terms of typical vestibular migraine. So usually, this is an old slide. I'm sorry about the mistake over here. This is with headache, not without, with history of headache. This is what it should be. I hope you can see my cursor here. So vertigo attacks with past history of headache or present history of headache. You think in terms of a vestibular migraine. In basilar migraine also, vertigo is the major symptom. Then migrainous aura may present with vertigo. But if it is vertigo occurring as a migrainous aura, this is as per the present Barani Society diagnostic criteria is not considered as vestibular migraine. So you should always ask in this patient when you're suspecting vestibular migraine, a history within the in the patient or a family history related to headaches and typical features of migraine like photophobia, phonophobia, and the common triggers of migraine.
So before we go to the next point,
yeah,
can you make just clear, because there are 3-4 terms which are used interchangeably. Like
like for example, the patient must have had at least 5 attacks to make a diagnosis of vestibular migraine.
So they call it sometimes migrainous vertigo. Is it the same as vestibular migraine?
Well, the previous terminology was vestibular, was migrainous vertigo.
Right.
As of today, the terminology is vestibular migraine.
Exactly.
Right? And the patient must have had at least 5 attacks. And the duration of the symptoms is from a few days, from a few minutes to a few days.
And can both the symptoms should be together or can have preceding and anteceding history also?
Sorry, could you go again?
I mean, the both headache and vertigo should be present at the same time?
Not necessarily so. Not necessarily so.
The patient might have history of headache in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Now he's having vertigo.
It's a very common thing in post-menopausal females. Sometimes the history of headaches goes back to their school days or their college days. And you have to literally probe a lot. And then they ultimately come out with the fact that they used to have typical migraine headaches when they were in school or in college. And what you're dealing with is a 45, 50, 55-year-old lady who has presented to you with symptoms typical of vestibular migraine as of today.
Right. And what is the time duration when we say that is to 5 attacks?
See, basically, they say 5 minutes to 72 hours. But when you get attacks for a few seconds and they are recurrent, these few second attacks are taken basically as a cluster. So the definition by definition, it is from 5 minutes to 72 hours. But we have seen cases where it goes even beyond 72 hours.
Right. Yes, sir, we can go ahead now.
Yeah, sure. So now coming to the central nervous system, that is the central disorders, when do we suspect them and how do we suspect them? So we'll come to cerebellar stroke related vertiginous syndromes. So isolated acute vertiginous syndrome without auditory symptoms. That suggests, let's make it very simple, a PICA, that's a posterior inferior cerebellar artery stroke, okay? Or the lateral medullary syndrome or the Wallenberg syndrome as we call it. And acute vertiginous syndrome which presents with auditory symptoms, you think in terms of lateral pontine syndrome suggestive of an ICA infarct. That's an anterior inferior cerebellar artery. Pseudo intoxication, that is acute presentation with ataxia, with pseudogastroenteritis. You should think in terms of lateral midbrain syndrome suggestive of a superior cerebellar artery attack, infarction. Now, a few points in lateral medullary syndrome. Of course, these would rather go into physical examination more so than the clinical history. But then, nonetheless, I've added them here. You have to look for hemifacial analgesia, unilateral absent gag reflex, palatal palsy, vocal cord palsy, Horner syndrome, body hemianalgesia, limb hemiataxia. Lateral pontine syndrome, the cardinal features would be a hemifacial sensory loss, a lower motor neuron type of facial paralysis, a Horner syndrome, body hemianalgesia, limb hemiataxia. Now, let me just say over here, because most of our audience, rather all of our audience, at least by and large, are ENTs. It's not that you have to, be very specific about all these things in your general ENT practice, but keep in mind all these things which are the dangerous signs, and this is where you think in terms of referring your patient of vertigo to a neurologist. Anyway, so lateral midbrain syndrome will present with fourth nerve palsy, hemifacial sensory loss, a Horner syndrome, body hemisensory loss, limb hemiataxia, or dysmetria. Now, coming to history pertaining to precipitating factors, those which are suggestive of an ischemic central lesion, old age, a history of smoking. Is he a hypertensive? Does he suffer from diabetes? Is there any history pertaining to thromboembolic disorders? So you have to think in terms of cardiomyopathy, valvular heart disease, or atrial fibrillations giving rise to the dizziness. So to summarize these things over here, if you have a patient where you have recurrent attacks of rotatory vertigo, and the unsteadiness is persistent on the other hand, on the other side, trigger factors are present or absent, and you have accompanying symptoms like hearing loss or tinnitus, ataxia or double vision, present or absent. So you can, fairly well reach a conclusion whether you are dealing with a patient of peripheral vestibular disorder or a central disorder. Well, we have gone through a haze of diagnostic possibilities, and I would request you all not to get perturbed by this, because by and large, all peripheral vestibular disorders will fall into one of the following three presentations. Either there is a case of aberrant stimulation or inhibition, or there is a bilateral labyrinthine failure, or you're dealing with a unilateral labyrinthine failure. I'm summarizing things again over here. Well, vertigo is there. You get one event with acute duration of hours, and there is a additional hearing loss also. The first and foremost diagnosis that comes to your mind is a labyrinthitis. And if these recurrent attacks are present without any hearing loss, and you get lateralized headache and aura on a monthly frequency, what you think in terms of is of a vestibular migraine. Positionally induced vertigo recurrent attacks, you think in terms of a BPPV. One single attack of acute vertigo lasting days, no hearing loss, think of vestibular neuritis. Fluctuating hearing loss with tinnitus and oral fullness with history of recurrent attacks, think in terms of a Meniere's disease. Constant symptoms, persistently present, patient comes with instability, postural imbalance, which becomes worse on walking, worse in darkness. The first thing that comes to mind is a bilateral vestibulopathy. Now consider the life of a patient condemned to live with an unresolved permanent dizziness. The most important cause for this situation is having not spent enough time with this patient, and we have not gone through his history thoroughly. Last but not the least, when dealing with vertigo, don't follow what we read in Hutchinson's clinical methods during our MBBS clinical days. Please do not hesitate to ask leading questions when dealing with a patient of vertigo or dizziness. So when it comes to making a diagnosis, history outweighs all high funda investigations. So what I'll now do is I will play a couple of videos which will give you an idea as to how easy it can be to arrive at a diagnosis without having gone any further than history. And yes, this will give me a few moments of rest from speaking also. Then I'll proceed over to physical examination. Those are valid. And then
Take up the volume, sir.
Volume is not good. Yeah, I think I can increase it a bit. Wait. Better now? Amit, is it better now?
We can't make the patient voice, sir.
You can't make out. So, okay, then I'll skip this one. I'll go to the next one because I think this next one is better. We'll skip this. Okay. Because that was the maximum volume I was able to get, Amit.
Okay, right.
So, madam, can you tell me about your problem? This is good.
Okay.
I have been having this.
So can you explain the same thing in your own voice, if possible?
Okay. How will you describe this giddiness?
It must be the good cases, what the patient is saying, and then what your diagnosis is.
Okay. Then. And how often do you get these attacks? I'll go back. Okay, I'll start from the beginning. So, madam, can you tell me about your problem?
Doctor, I'm feeling giddy since yesterday now.
She was feeling giddy since yesterday.
Having it time and again now.
She has it time and again. Okay. How will you describe this giddiness?
Sometimes I feel like it's moving around, and also at times I feel like there's no anything shaking.
So she sometimes feels vertiginous, typical rotatory vertigo. Sometimes things are moving around. She's sometimes even perfectly all right for 3 to 4 months, or sometimes it happens once in a month.
Do you get any nausea or vomiting with these attacks?
Yes, nausea is common.
Nausea and vomiting common.
Usually, how long does it take to get all right, get out of the attack?
At times it's 1 or 2 hours, but it can be longer also.
Usually 1 to 2 hours, could be longer.
Sensation or something?
Yes, I do get feeling in the left ear.
She gets tinnitus in the left ear.
Yes, doctor, I used to have, no hearing loss, but then it's just ringing.
And do you get headaches?
History of headaches
Yes, doctor.
present.
I used to have headaches since I was in school. Now it's less often.
Headaches in school, less often now.
And any nausea or vomiting alongside the headache when you get the headaches?
Yes, usually.
Nausea along with the headaches also, vomiting also sometimes.
Yes.
And any visual disturbance like before the headaches?
Avinash Bijlani, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, when I am not able to understand what the patient is speaking, so can you make it you explain that
Is
this
it
will be
only
the
you can't hear, or everybody can't hear, Amit? Because when I tried earlier in some other talk, these videos were audible
there
to
was
the
a
audience.
suggestion that we can use your computer audio maybe. Right now you are using your microphone. You are using a microphone?
Avinash,
I think I'll do one thing.
Avinash sir, what you
Yeah.
do, you reshare. While resharing, there are 2 options at the down. That is optimize video, share computer. Okay, share computer audio.
No,
Go
where?
to reshare. Go to reshare. New share.
Is the option available?
On
sir?
this button.
Okay, just wait.
No, not there. You should go to the control of Zoom. Zoom control you should go. There is new share is there. New share in the Zoom control.
So first I'll have to stop sharing.
Don't stop share. There is a button called share screen or new share is there.
Share screen on the below screen. It's in green, sir.
Okay, I'll
No,
just
you
come
press
to it.
escape. Press escape. I think you are hiding it, na? You are hiding the controls, right?
Yeah, I was hiding the control. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
you
okay.
bring back the
I'll
control.
go back to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
so
I'm
bring back the
there.
control.
Yeah.
there is a new share button is there, green color.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you press that, okay, then
Yeah.
you will see options, share computer audio and optimize video. Choose computer audio.
Share computer sound and optimize screen sharing for video clip. Yeah.
That
Done.
video clip you ignore it. You just go
Yeah.
to share computer audio and
Yeah.
reshare the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Now see.
So, madam, can you tell me about your problem?
Has it improved?
Doctor, I'm feeling giddy since yesterday now. I have been having this.
Fantastic. Very good.
For the last 2 years.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, how will you describe this giddiness?
Sometimes I feel everything is moving around, and also at times I feel as if there's an earthquake. Everything is shaking.
And how often do you get these attacks?
Maybe once a month. Sometimes I'm all right for 3 or 4 months.
When nothing happens, you're perfectly all right for 3 to 4 months, and then suddenly it comes up.
Yes.
Okay. And do you get any nausea or vomiting with these attacks?
Yes. Nausea is common. Sometimes I've vomited as well.
Okay. And usually, how long does it take to get all right, get out of the attack?
At times it's 1 or 2 hours, but it can be longer also for 2 or 3 days.
Any other problem like in the ears, any ringing sensation or something?
Yes, I do get ringing in my left ear.
In the left ear. Okay. Any hearing loss also?
Yes, doctor. I used to have, no hearing loss, but then it's just ringing.
Okay. And do you get headaches?
Yes, doctor. I used to have headaches since I was in school. Now it's less often. Left side and throbbing is much when it comes.
Okay. And any nausea or vomiting alongside the headache when you get the headaches?
Yes, usually.
Usually. Do you vomit also?
Yes.
Okay. And any visual disturbance like before the headaches have started or anything that...
Yes, I see
happens to you?
double, and at times I see blurred as well.
And do you find any difficulty when you go out in the sunlight or when you
Bright
facing
light
bright
is bad.
lights?
Yes, the disc is bad. Yes, I prefer darkness and silence.
And are you upset with loud noises also during these headaches?
Yes, my daughter's screaming is bad. TV on high volume is bad.
Anything or any circumstances that lead to the headaches or the dizziness? Like if you've not had a proper sleep or something?
Yes, my job is such. I miss out on sleep. Strong odor of deos or while cooking, anything strong hits.
And also, is it provoked by hunger if you're not eaten for quite some time and your lunch is delayed or something?
Yes, skipping meals is bad.
And is it also provoked by any strenuous activities like jogging or having walked a long distance?
Once I had to walk from work to home because I could not get transport. The attack was bad.
That day you had a severe attack.
Yes.
Hello. So this was a typical history of vestibular migraine.
Right. And what was the previous one, sir?
The previous was Menius, but Amit, I'm looking at the watch.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
17 minutes
Just-
past. It's 17 minutes past 8, and I'm yet to cover the physical examination, which was supposed to be longer than this.
Right.
I was supposed to spend about